Welcome back to another edition of Higher Education Today. I'm your host, Stephen Roy Goodman. We're here in New Hampshire, and specifically at St. Anselm College at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. We're going to be speaking about the New Hampshire primary. And I'm here with Neil Levesque. Welcome, Neil.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thanks for coming, and thanks for having us here. Neil, if we could start with, what is the Institute of Politics, and why does a university have an Institute of Politics?
Well, this is really the central location for politics in a small state like New Hampshire that really a lot of people call our state sport politics. So we're right in the middle. It's 20,000 square feet. We have 2 auditoriums, a full television studio. We do 6 to 8 big events a week all around politics. We do polling, and of course our St. Anselm students are here. So it's really the central location for politics in a very political state.
And what about the New Hampshire primary? What do you think about the primary per se?
Well, our primary is over 100 years old, and we're not trying to tell other states and other people what to do. What we do here in this small state that, again, is very, very political. We have the highest voter turnouts in the nation. We're very engaged. And we're testing candidates. So the candidates come here. We ask them questions. We ask them follow-up questions. Money really doesn't play a big factor here in New Hampshire with television advertising. So you have to have a good candidate. And what happens after New Hampshire is that you have tested good candidates moving forward to the general election. So that's what we're hoping to have here on Tuesday, is an election where good candidates rise to the top and go on to represent their parties.
Well, and speaking of good candidates rising to the top, maybe if we can talk about good students rising to the top with those candidates. What are some things that students here do to get involved?
Well, students from all majors engage here at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics. We have an ambassador program. They really run the institute. They introduce speakers, they engage them, they're doing our polling. So it's all really combined around students. That being said, what happens is that you understand what the professional side of politics is, so that if you leave here and you become a nurse, or you become a business person, or whatever your job is, politics is going to affect your life. It's unavoidable. And so having a real good understanding of it is what we try to teach here.
And what are some courses in particular?
Well, we have a full politics program here, communications. It's a liberal arts college generally, and so the students are all engaged in that. But a lot of the activities of the Institute are outside of that, where they learn the practical side of politics from being around the media, being around politicians, seeing how it all interacts, and being around a lot of big business people.
And what advice would you give for people who may not be from New Hampshire, who are watching or thinking about this institute?
Well, a lot of people, when they come to New Hampshire, they can't believe how civically engaged we are. How much, it's not unusual that you are with the governor of New Hampshire, or meeting with your U.S. senator, or going to a town hall meeting here in New Hampshire. And so it's really surprising to people. The good thing about New Hampshire is that we do get engaged like that. It's real democracy, and the argument happens here, and the argument, of course, in politics is good.
And I guess one more question, if I may, about the argument of politics. Later today, we're going to be speaking with what some people might call a candidate who's not at the top of the food chain. But he argues, when we pre-interviewed him, that it's democracy and that everybody should have the right to run for office. And I'm sure he's going to make the case for why he's a candidate, but he's also going to say, well, why it's important for there to be democracy to allow candidates to run.
Well, the great thing about New Hampshire, you can run for president. You can go to our Secretary of State's office and, just like any other person, file for the candidacy. There's over 20 candidates on each side of the ballot this time. And so it gives people an opportunity to participate. We hold what we call the Lesser Known Candidates Forum for candidates that are lesser known to the public. And we invite all 50 candidates here to participate. It's a really interesting event. But again, everyone in America should have the option to run for president if they're qualified to do so. And in New Hampshire, they get a chance to do so.
We're continuing our discussion about the New Hampshire primary with McKinley Sbordone, who is the general manager of the Hampshire Hills Athletic Club here in Milford, New Hampshire.
Glad to be here.
Well, thanks for having us. As you know, we're talking about behind the scenes of the New Hampshire primary. One of the things that I think would interest our viewers very much is why is an athletic club such a part of the New Hampshire primary? And what are you doing with different candidates?
So we're a very unique venue. We have vast spaces where we can accommodate different sizes of people. So we've done events in the primaries as big as almost 5,000 down to 20. So it does give a lot of variety for candidates when they're looking at places to draw the public in, and also stay within the budgets that they are looking for. So we have been very fortunate to host so many candidates because of our abilities.
And do you ever turn down candidates because they don't get enough support or you don't like their ideas?
Certainly, no. We do not put politics into it at all. We look at it as an opportunity to serve the public, and it is a public event. So we are not deciding who's coming, and we have had candidates who are Democrats, Republicans, Independents, everyone in between. That does not go into the decision booking an event.
Well, and speaking of booking the event, how do you decide how big a room or how much food you have?
So that's the unique part of booking any political event because with their fundraising and their growing popularity, it does tend to change based on the timing of the event. We have had people book small events, which within a 24-hour window have kind of spiraled into a bigger event because they are getting more RSVPs. So we have been able to pivot a little bit to grow into some of our larger spaces. Obviously, we have to work within what we have available. But one that we just recently had, they started booking for under 200, and there was luckily no food involved, which does make it a little more complicated. But they continued to grow and grow, and by the end of it, 24 hours in advance, it was at 650, where they had to hit the capacity based on what we were going to be able to provide them. So we have to be able to work with them. Obviously, they're doing their best, but they want to be able to reach as many people as they possibly can too.
And what about media coverage? What happens if the media, if we wanted to cover this or somebody else wanted to cover it, how would you accommodate the media?
So typically that's part of the booking process. If they wanted to have the press room or a separate area for the press, we would set that up on the back end. So we have certain spaces where conference rooms where they can enter before they meet the public and ask the questions. Some people have done radio shows beforehand, and that is kind of how we lay out our booking process.
Well, I find New Hampshire to be fascinating because since I've been here and the last time I was at the New Hampshire primary, you can just go to any candidate's event you want, just showing up. And I find that fascinating.
Yeah, so that was really interesting to deal with, obviously RSVPs for us in our business with weddings and celebrations of life. RSVPs mean actual people attending. The way that the candidates and their teams look at it, they usually look at 50% of the RSVPs coming, which in actuality, it could mean 100% of those people are coming. So it is kind of nerve-wracking being a business because we have to work within our capacities, and we have fire and police who have to hit certain numbers. So we do have to count at the door and keep a head count. So unfortunately, in those cases, when they say it's open to the public, it can still be shut down based on capacity. So yeah, it's a learning curve for sure.
Well, one last thing before I let you go. And speaking of the learning curve, what about the business aspect of it? How do you know that, or how do you make sure that a candidate says, doesn't pay you? You know, we rent the space, or we might want to rent the space, and then all of a sudden they drop out.
So that is something that we're aware of. We do have a contract to our business contract. So if they were to book a certain date, they have to put a deposit down for that date. That is non-refundable. So that gives us some security, knowing that if somebody else wanted to book that date, we're not losing that completely. But we understand too what we're dealing with, and leading up to New Hampshire, people are kind of getting an idea of where they're at in the race. So some have fallen out, and we just have learned in our practice that it is best to get the balance up front day of, so that we're not chasing, because once they leave New Hampshire, they're off and running to the next state. So for us, we try and close business that day.
Fair enough. One final question. Who do you deal with on the campaigns?
Typically, they have somebody running the teams of New Hampshire. So we have a point person, and then the day of, that point person could certainly change. It's usually somebody who's a little higher up in like the campaign, depending on who it is. Obviously, we've had many different people who've been running come through here, and sometimes it's that person, sometimes it's no connection to that person, but usually it is the same person leading up to it, and then the day of business, it's just kind of a whole entire crew who comes in here.
You're the general manager of this facility, but before you were a general manager here, my understanding is that you were a Division I athlete yourself, so at Boston University, so you know something about universities and you know something about managing an athletic facility. What advice would you have for other athletic facilities around the country that might be thinking about trying to do venue management?
So I think with my athletic background, that certainly did help me a lot in terms of being organized and having, the discipline that sports serves you. But I also had an amazing experience with the communication school at BU, where I had the opportunity to have internships and work with a variety of different companies and people and see what really interested me. And being able to use my marketing business background and then having the athletic background kind of was a perfect marriage with what I'm doing here at Hampshire Hill. So it certainly was an amazing experience.
Well, that's interesting because, so many of my students will say, well, how do I know that a such and such degree at such and such university is going to lead to something? But I will often explain that you never know with 100% certainty, but sometimes your interests merge and you can put these things together. And here you are running a big athletic facility, but you yourself were an athlete and you're engaging with all these candidates.
Yeah, it's really an amazing. I have done a little bit of everything throughout Hampshire Hills, which has also given me that experience to manage people and work with a variety of different people. But I truly think that my experience at BU was that stepping stone, because it certainly made me get out of that comfort zone and work with different people and meet new people. And the city of Boston, you are exposed to so much. So it has been an amazing experience.
Well, thank you so much for having us, and continued good luck. And we are north of Boston, considerably north of Boston in the New Hampshire primary. And I want to say for the record, it is incredibly cold up here. But the people of New Hampshire have been very welcoming, and we're going to continue our discussion about the New Hampshire primary. We're continuing our discussion about the New Hampshire primary. I'm here at the Red Arrow Diner in Manchester, New Hampshire, with Amanda Wihby, who's one of the co-owners of the Red Arrow Diner.
Hi there, how are you?
Well, how are you? And thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're delighted. Amanda, could you say a word or two about this diner? I've been to many diners, but I've never been to such a political diner.
Well, we are here to provide a space, hot coffee, and warm food to both sides of the aisle. We've been doing it for 100 years now. We're actually celebrating our 102nd year in business. And the First Nation has been around for 100 years as well, so it's a tradition that's been around for quite some time.
And speaking of this tradition, I find it remarkable that anybody can run, anybody can participate. What do you think about that?
I think it's great. I think, like I said, we're here to provide a space for people who want to try it out, become a name, and get to talk to people, ask them their issues, and hopefully get some answers.
Well, speaking of the answers, what about food preferences of candidates? Have you gotten to know some candidates over the years and seen what they like to eat?
So President Trump has a burger on the menu named the Trump Tower Burger. He ordered it when he came in 2016. And we've been actually keeping a list so far. Senator Tim Scott ordered an arrow omelet with grits, and Dean Phillips had a caprese Benny with some beans. So we're keeping a list, and we're gonna see where that goes.
That's really interesting. And what about the candidates who want to have a sandwich named for them? Have they ever approached you about that?
No one's ever asked for it, but we're happy to do it.
That's really great. Well, any advice that you would have for candidates coming up to New Hampshire? Obviously, you want them to come to the Red Arrow, but what else do you want them to do and know about New Hampshire?
Well, the road to the White House actually goes through those doors right there. So if you want to get in, that's where they have to come. And because every modern president every president in modern history has actually come through here. So
You heard it here. The Red Arrow Diner. Amanda, thank you so much.
thank you.
We're continuing our discussion in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'm here with Brian Nolen, who's an activist from Bedford, New Hampshire. Welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Nice to join you today.
Well, thanks for coming. I understand that you're an activist in Bedford regarding the New Hampshire primary, but in particular, you're a particular activist as it relates to Ukraine.
That's right. Shortly after the war started, I started a nonprofit in Bedford that has taken off since. We've been back and forth to Ukraine 6 times. I've spent about 6 months there. We raise money here, bring the money to Ukraine, and deliver it to the hardest hit part of the country where the Russians have been evicted from the villages. A lot of damage there. They're in desperate need of aid, so we'll bring a van load of aid out to each one of these villages every day.
And what does the New Hampshire primary have to do with that? Are you simply trying to get publicity for your efforts?
Well, we're trying to raise awareness about Ukraine and make sure it stays out front and center because it's been overshadowed by what's gone on in Israel and Gaza lately. And also just express our support for any candidate that's willing to stand up, speak the truth about Ukraine, that it's critical that we stay involved there. And it's a good investment for American dollars to prevent war where NATO has to get involved. So I'm happy to support any candidate that'll stand up and support Ukraine.
Well, thank you for your time today, and good luck to you.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Thank you. We continue our discussion about the New Hampshire primary, and I've got with me one of the presidential candidates in New Hampshire, Mark Stewart, who is I think this is your 4th time running.
It is. I'm in the New Hampshire, Vermont, and D.C. primary on the Democrat Party's body.
Fair enough. Well, Mark, if you can tell us a little bit about why you're running for president, and let's start with why, and then also, how did you get on the ballot?
The why is because so many people are frustrated with Congress primarily. They have a worse rating than Trump or Biden. They don't do their jobs. And if a little unheralded person like me can take a decent slice out of the sitting president, Biden is my competitor, it might signal to a lot of people, number one, we can make change. Number two, they can run for office. I'd like to see a horde of new people running for state house seats, governorships, U.S. Congress. How do you get on the ballot? Well, in New Hampshire, it's very easy. You pay your $1,000 to the Secretary of State. I did that back in October. Other states, it is harder. They have petitioning requirements, or you could be a very highly known person, and then their own secretaries have discretion to put you on the ballot. New Hampshire, it's truly a free-for-all, which is a good thing. The ballot on the Democrat side has 21 names.
And how about on the Republican side?
I think they have 16.
So those people have paid $1,000 to be on the ballot. Okay, well, but why is New Hampshire so important?
It is first, and it is the best lens for every other voter. Because folks like you, folks around here who can see candidates, be interviewed, get their sentiments back and forth from candidates, we become the lens for folks in California, New Mexico, Nevada, to all see what these candidates are about. So New Hampshire not only being first, but being tight, that this is retail. This is not broad, this is close, and candidates really have a good chance for people to know them.
Well, speaking of candidates knowing them, maybe if you could say a word or two about what's your platform? What are some of the things that you want to talk about when you're on the trail and what you have been talking about?
I am the liberty-minded Democrat. Now that sounds foreign to a lot of people, but JFK was in that mode. Even to a large extent, Jimmy Carter was fairly liberty-minded. He deregulated a lot of stuff. There is now one candidate among those 21 who would like to see much less government. Well, in a Democratic Party whose heads are bloating the government, making it more restrictive on businesses, on media, on just plain speaking out, we need more candidates that are standing for liberty in the Democrat Party.
What about liberty as it relates to universities? This is a higher education show. Do you have anything to say about liberty as it relates to universities?
For private universities, no. They should be and pretty much are free to admit who they want, to give the kind of courses, the standards that they want. State-run universities, not so. They are meant to have state guidelines. I therefore think more competition among universities would be good. And if some of the state-run universities chose to have one type of program, maybe they're more practical, and another state university in the same state is the more theoretical, scholarly, that's a nice choice for everyone.
What about high schools? What about the curriculum in high schools? I've been attending a number of events here, and a number of candidates have criticized what they perceive as not transparency.
I am pro-choice on education fervently. Universal school choice implies that there's some dollars that every family is entitled to for their kid. Let them use it how they want, because they will almost certainly make good decisions for their family, better than a school board can make, and more nimble so that they could move if their school is disappointing. It means that private school can get dollars from the public. Homeschool kids, there's a lot in New Hampshire, would not be double paying. They do have to pay for their education, and they're paying property taxes. If you have universal school choice, it's equatable across the board.
Well, fair enough. We only have a minute or so left. Is there anything else that you would like to say to a voter, A, and B, to a Higher Education Today audience thinking about education issues that I haven't asked?
Well, I am an educator. I have helped propel a lot of students to college. And these very students have an incredible amount of power tomorrow. Literally, in New Hampshire, a small primary where on the Democratic side, probably only 30,000 people are going to be voting. If 3,000 of your classmates at college in New Hampshire decide to sort of block vote for one candidate that you would like to see, you make a world of difference. You might be the most politically powerful 19-year-olds on the planet. So I'd like to see more college engagement, that not just waving signs and making statements, but actually voting for the sentimental candidate that you most like.
Well, fair enough. Mark, good luck to you.
Thank you.
Thank you to all our guests for coming on this behind the scenes of the New Hampshire primary segment. This is a very special segment for me, and I want to share with you why. I believe the New Hampshire primary is really what makes representative democracy the best that you can possibly imagine in the United States context. One of the things that's fascinating to me about coming up to New Hampshire for the New Hampshire primary is that anybody can go to any of the events. And this is particularly important for, of course, students, but it's important for non-students. It's important for every person in the United States. And one of the things that I think makes the primary so special is that the candidates really do have to actually talk to the people, and they need to share ideas, and they need to share their visions for the United States and for the rest of the world. One of the things that intrigues me so much about going from event to event when I'm up here in New Hampshire is that people are not afraid of having discourse. And one of the things that I think has really been harmful to the United States in the past generation or so is less and less dialogue. I think we need more and more dialogue. We need more and more students. We need more and more citizens who engage in our democracy and are willing to have serious discussions about difficulties we're having, what's going right, what's going wrong. And so I'd like to applaud the New Hampshire primary, and I'd like to specifically applaud the Secretary of State in New Hampshire for allowing so many candidates to actually run for office. It enables citizen democracy to really take foot and to take hold. And also, I'd like to say thank you to the people who came on our show today. I'd like to say special thanks to St. Anselm College, which has the Institute of Politics, the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, and they have done a tremendous job in bringing democracy to citizens in New Hampshire and elsewhere. As you remember earlier this segment, we heard from the folks at the general manager at Hampshire Hills Athletic Club. Well, that's an interesting example of a person and an entity who, it's a private entity, but that private entity is using its resources to make sure that democracy is flourishing in New Hampshire. And yes, of course, they're charging candidates, but the candidates have to have the event somewhere. So I think that is absolutely terrific. The Red Arrow Diner, as many of you know, is one of the world famous diners in New Hampshire and around the rest of the world, because of the New Hampshire primary. And why? Because they make their space available for candidates to go and talk to the media, talk to individuals about their platforms. In terms of our friend from Ukraine, who is working from New Hampshire to support the efforts in Ukraine, I think that's terrific, but he's a citizen, and he's doing that as a Democrat, a small d Democrat, by using his platform as a citizen of the world to promote his ideas and using the New Hampshire primary as a way of sharing his views of the world. And finally, to Mark Stewart, who is a candidate for president. Mark is an educator, but I don't agree with all of his ideas, and I'm sure that you may not agree with all of his ideas, but you may agree with some of his ideas. And not in defense of him or not in not defense of him, but you may not agree with every idea of everybody. But Mark has the courage to come up to New Hampshire every 4 years and to talk to people on street corners, in debates, and in polling places, and everywhere he can, to make the case for why he thinks his vision of America should be the one going forward. So you may not agree with everything he has to say, and you may not have to agree with everything that everybody else that came on the show today had to say, but I want you to please support them for their efforts to do so. And that's what democracy is about. And the message I'd like to leave with you, the students and the faculty who are watching this show, is that we want to encourage more students to study politics and government. We want to encourage more young people to get involved in the democratic process, to vote, to work for candidates, to promote ideas, and that's what democracy is all about. So, and I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for continuing to support us. Let me give you a few websites if you'd like additional information about the people who came onto the show today. First, St. Anselm College, anselm.edu, hampshirehills.com, redarrowdiner.com, nh4ukraine.org, and finally, stewartforliberty.com. And if you would like to send a note to me at the show, please go ahead and do so by sending an email to highereducationtoday@topcolleges.com. And thank you for watching. We will continue to bring you quality discussions about important matters in today's college and university world. I'm Stephen Roy Goodman, and you've been watching Higher Education Today.